You might be thinking that Red Bull had a pretty ideal weekend in Singapore. Sure, Max didn't win, but Sergio Perez took the victory at a rain-affected Marina Bay Circuit, showing that he still has what it takes to drive at Red Bull. But all of this was just a bit of a sideshow to the potentially huge controversy of them breaching the cost cap in 2021. This is Red Bull's biggest nightmare, and might have huge consequences for last year's, this year's, and next year's championship. Max Verstappen described his weekend as really terrible after finishing 8th in qualifying thanks to a fueling problem, which meant he had to back off from a potential pole position lap to avoid not having enough fuel on board to submit a sample after qualifying. Then on Sunday, he had his engine on the wrong setting at the start, which meant he dropped to 12th place by turn 1. He still managed to finish in 7th and will probably still win the Drivers' Championship next weekend in Suzuka, but that isn't even the worst of it. His World Drivers' Championship title in 2021 has come into question, following accusations by Mercedes and Ferrari. Ferrari and Mercedes both say it's an open secret that two teams broke Formula One's budget cap last year. This story broke on Friday in Singapore, but Red Bull team boss Christian Horner described claims they'd breached the $145 million limit as speculation. Ferrari racing director Laurent Mekies said, "It's now no secret that two teams broke the 2021 budget cap regulations, one by a significant amount, the other less so." Mercedes team principal Toto Wolff added, "There's a team in minor breach, which is more procedural, and another team that is fundamentally massively over, and that is still being looked at. That's an open secret in the paddock." At the moment, the amount of facts about this are pretty thin on the ground, and Ferrari and Mercedes have failed to back up their claims with any information or actual names, and we can't find a source for the fact that Red Bull is one of the teams, but the media seems to have accepted that they are one of the two. The other is thought to be Aston Martin, but there doesn't seem to be a consensus either way which team has breached the cap significantly. From the way Mercedes and Ferrari have reacted though, we should probably assume they think it's Red Bull. Though they would be upset at Aston Martin breaking the rules, considering their lack of competitiveness this season, they'd probably be making a little less noise about it. Wolff said in Singapore, "The cost cap is probably the most important evolution of regulations to keep a level playing field, to allow teams that haven't got the full budget to catch up, and to put a ceiling on the spending of the top teams. It is of huge importance for a demonstration that these regulations are policed, and I have no reason to believe otherwise." The FIA, particularly Mohammed Ben Sulayem, the president, has shown a pretty robust stance on enforcing all kinds of regulations. So if we're talking now about something big, he will show the same integrity and leadership that he's done before. One question that seems to be getting thrown up by a lot of people is why has the process of checking the budgeting of teams taken so long? After all, the 2021 season did finish almost 10 months ago. Ferrari have already been questioning whether the FIA has the manpower to enforce the cost cap, and this delay will only highlight that question. Double-checking the accounting of an entire F1 team, with its hundreds if not thousands of staff members, supply lines, work sites, projects and everything else that goes on behind the scenes will take time. The accusations, if proved to be true, risk exasperating problems F1 has had with the credibility of the 2021 season, and extending them into this year. The claims relate to 2021, when Red Bull's Max Verstappen clinched his maiden title from Mercedes' Lewis Hamilton, after a controversial end to the season, in which FIA race director Michael Massey failed to implement the rules correctly during a late safety car period. The budget teams spend during a season also includes their development for the following year's car, so any breach would have had an impact on a team's performance in 2022. Any breach would potentially have affected last year's championship, as well as this championship, or just one of the two, but the FIA will be very unwilling to change the result of previous championships. What is more likely is that any punishment will be imposed on the 2023 season. Confirmation of what has actually happened will come this Wednesday, when the FIA plans to issue teams that were under last year's cost cap with their compliance certificates. Any squad that exceeded the limit in either a minor or material way will find out they are likely subject to a hearing where punishments will be handed out. We've seen some rumours suggesting that Red Bull were as much as $10 million over the cost cap, but couldn't find the source for where that rumour started either. Despite what its main opposition are saying, Red Bull remains absolute that it stands by its original submission that was made in March, which sources have suggested was actually under the limit by several $1 million. Asked if he was nervous about the outcome of Wednesday, Red Bull team boss Christian Horner said, No, I'm absolutely confident in our submission. It's been through a process. It went in March in terms of being signed off fully by our auditors, who are obviously one of the big three. And we believe that we are comfortably within the cap. So the FIA are following their process. We expect, hopefully, and potentially this week, to hear not just us, but all of the teams the outcome of that process. While Red Bull does not know what the FIA will state on Wednesday, Christian Horner admits that there is huge responsibility on the governing body to ensure the robustness of its investigators and responses. These are a brand new set of regulations that are highly complicated and that apply to companies of different structures, different formulations, and of course regulations, he said. There's always different interpretations to those regulations, so in the first year, it will be very interesting to see how this is applied. We've seen clarifications, even seen the submissions were made that apply to last year, so it's always going to be a process of evolution. Horner certainly sounds confident that his team stayed under the cap, though perhaps there's something within the clarifications he's referring to that has meant new costs have been included under the cap. Certainly, there's no reason for a team to have purposely gone over. They'll know that the FIA will come down hard on anyone that makes that mistake. Taking short-term gain over long-term progression makes little sense in a sport that's competitive hierarchy moves at glacial rates. What about the other team involved in this though? Aston Martin may not be as big a story as Red Bull due to the disparity in their competitiveness and the potential implication on world championships, but this is still a serious issue for the team looking to make progress in the coming seasons. In Singapore, sources including some rival team bosses suggested that Aston Martin may have committed a procedural breach and an offence less serious than the allegedly associated with Red Bull. However, team principal Mike Crack insists that there has been no news from the FIA about any issues ahead of Wednesday's expected confirmation of which teams fully complied with the 2021 cap. It's a process where you give your submission and then the FIA is analysing this and comes back with questions, he said. And this process is still going on, so we don't really know what will be the result. There is a discussion going on. We have questions about interpretation, they have questions about interpretation. And we were surprised to read our name in this thing. So, let's see. We don't think that we've done anything majorly wrong. Mike might say he was surprised to see his team labelled in this, but he also hints at the FIA and Aston Martin discussing the finer technicalities of what is and isn't included within the cap. Crack admitted that it had been frustrating for the team to be named. It is upsetting. I think the most important thing is to keep focus on the weekend. When the Thursday or Friday starts like that, it's important not to distract the people. And from our point of view, it was good that we were not the only one mentioned. So you guys, you concentrated on the other side of the paddock. It is unfortunate that these things come out like that, but it's F1. Some rival teams have suggested Aston has spent a lot of money on recruitment recently and offered big salaries, implying that the team's wage bill may have edged the team over the cap. This is typical paddock. The best defense is attacking, said Crack. I think at the end of the day, we must not forget we are significantly less people than most teams are. We need to look at ourselves. You will not have a war of words from us. We need to concentrate on making progress. This is much more important than using the press to make statements. The comments from Toto Wolff and Mattia Binotto accusing teams of breaking the cost cap without backing them up with any evidence are empty at best and defamatory at worst. Until the FIA gives us more information on Wednesday, no one should be accusing anyone of anything, because no one's offered any evidence to back up their accusations. However, should any team be found to have breached the cost cap, then the FIA needs to punish them with the full force available to try to protect the competitive integrity of F1. If it is Red Bull who breached the cap, what do you think the FIA will do? And should teams be making serious accusations like these without having evidence to back them up? Let us know your opinions down below, and until next time, drive safe and bye for now.